The MCU has been in a interesting state as of late, to put it lightly. With Captain America Brave New World being a commercial and critical bomb, it's safe to say the MCU is not doing too well. But that does beg the question of how did we get here? Short answer, it's complicated.
Is that just your go-to answer for literally everything?
Yes, because things are complicated. Some people say the MCU is going bad because Disney's gone woke. Some people say it's superhero fatigue. Other people say everyone is tired of the Marvel IP. While others are saying they're just bad movies. And others say it should have ended after Endgame. And they're all correct to some degree. Truly is a, well yes but actually no scenario. There's hints of truth in all of this, but it's all more complicated than that. It's kind of a combination of all of them. Like a really bad salad, really. So to say that there's a ton of problems with the MCU is, well, an understatement. But that's an undertaking I'm willing to go into right now. So let's dive right into it, shall we? Let's get the easy one out of the way first. The superhero/Marvel fatigue. Yeah, this one was kind of very easily disproven by the existence of Marvel Snap and Marvel Rivals. Both games use the Marvel IP and all of the Marvel IP at that. And both are critically acclaimed and very successful at that. Rivals especially still doing insanely well even after its initial launch, quickly becoming one of the most popular games of the current year. And a lot of that has to do with the Marvel IP. People genuinely love these characters, and the fact that Rivals actually does them justice to some degree is quite refreshing. And it's not superhero fatigue either, as people actually love superhero stuff. Superheroes have always been a fun concept that people have played around with for years. I mean, it really isn't superhero fatigue, as if it was superhero fatigue, we'd all not want to see Batman, Superman, or any DC character, yet they're just kind of just doing poorly because the films suck. In reality, it's just oversaturation fatigue. Believe it or not, companies love to jump on trends. I know, shocking. The most recent one being the AI boom, which yeah, I've done an entire video on that. Albeit the quality is kinda questionable, but it is there if you want to go watch it.
Ah yes, an hour and a half of you stuttering relentlessly. How fun!
Oh, it was my first longer video, cut me some slack. But even before the AI boom, there was the zombie boom. This whole thing is a big enough topic to talk about on its own, funnily enough. Although I'm not going to right now, maybe at a later date. But needless to say, every single movie was a zombie movie. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but needless to say, there was a ton of zombie movies. And even movies that weren't originally intended to be zombie movies got turned into zombie movies, like I Am Legend. Yeah, the main antagonists were originally vampires, not zombies, but gotta change things around to fit that zombie market. So needless to say, this whole trend hopping thing is nothing new. In reality, when anything is oversaturated, it gets real boring real quickly. One other thing I could point to in the same kind of superhero genre is the evil Superman genre. I mean, yeah, we get it. Homelander and Omni-Man are bad Supermen. Can we have something different, please?
No, you will eat your evil Superman veggies and you will like them.
I'm tired of the evil Superman veggies. At least fry the veggies, for fuck's sake.
But then they would be tolerable, and it's no fun unless you squirm.
Jeez, I forgot how evil you are sometimes, Mimo. But it's not just the whole evil Superman thing, it's the superheroes, but they're actually assholes. I mean, yeah, that kinda worked for something like Watchmen, but the thing is, Watchmen was the counterculture. Problem is, when the counterculture becomes the culture, it kinda stops being unique and cool. It becomes boring. And it loses its novelty very quickly. The same thing is simply happening to all the superhero films. They're all kind of feeling the same, really. There's kind of just no style anymore. Like, especially with something like Aquaman trying to make him cool instead of embracing what, people actually liked about Aquaman. I think Brave and the Bold actually does a really good job at conveying Aquaman as a character. Yeah, he's goofy, yeah, he's campy, but he's also insanely fun. I do not like this particular interpretation of Aquaman, but if you like it, that's on you. And similarly, there's kind of a big problem with the MCU having this kind of homogenization. Where DC's problem is it doesn't know how to take itself not seriously. Marvel's problem is it doesn't know when to take itself seriously. And look, it's fine to have humor in serious situations, that helps lighten the mood. But the problem is if every film is following this sort of formula, it gets repetitive, very quickly. And unfortunately, this all started with a film I actually like, Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah, Guardians is a pretty silly film series. Because to be honest, it kinda needed to be. The Guardians of the Galaxy, by all accounts, were a very obscure group of characters. Unless you were very deep into comics, you probably had no idea they existed. Now try selling this to a normie audience, they probably would not buy it. I mean, you got a talking, not raccoon, but looks like a raccoon, but actually isn't a raccoon because it's completely different. A talking tree that can only say one particular sentence, that being, I am Groot, and sometimes we are Groot. As well as 3 completely unrelated characters with completely different backstories. Yeah, this is not gonna work, which is why James Gunn made the film inherently comedic. But something you also need to understand from the Guardians films is that they also had their edge of serious moments. Yeah, the films were goofy, but oftentimes you had scenes to balance it out. What made Guardians great was the fact that it had a balance between the two. You had insanely goofy characters, but deep down they all had their own form of trauma. Especially since Guardians knew how to make something funny. 2 of my favorite scenes from the film actually come from Yondu. Particularly, I know who you are because you're me scene and the Mary Poppins, y'all! Because tonally they're 2 completely different scenes, yet they don't feel out of place. It's really funny because Yondu doesn't know who Mary Poppins is. How would he know who Mary Poppins is? You, the audience, probably knows who Mary Poppins is, but he doesn't. For all he knows, Mary Poppins could be like the space pirate or something. And that's why the joke is funny. It feels genuine. When a character laughs or cries, you can definitely tell it's genuine. There's nothing being forced. Someone like Drax might be a huge goofball, but he's doing it to hide the fact that he's deeply saddened by the loss of his family. Same goes for something like Rocket. He's angry, he's hostile, and he pushes everyone away, but deep down he's scared to be alone. These characters are insanely goofy, yet they have memorable personalities and make you root for them. That is good storytelling. It just so happens to be hidden under a layer of 80s nostalgia and just pretty good music choice. The problem is Disney took all the wrong lessons from Guardians. Now suddenly every film needs to have a comedic edge to it, and that doesn't really work. Which brings me on to the next point of just bad movie fatigue. Or more accurately, as this should be called, Disney movie fatigue. Yeah, if you can't tell, Disney has not exactly been pumping out quality as of late. Most of the time it's half-assed remakes or just bad movies in general. You can especially see this with something like Star Wars just not having a good film in a long while. Although that in its own right is also an entire video to talk about.
What more could you possibly add to that conversation?
I don't know, I like the Star Wars media more than I do the movies.
You're gonna piss a lot of people off with that opinion.
I know, but I like the external media a lot more. You know, before Disney fucked with even that. Which is actually kind of just the problem if Disney doesn't know when to keep its grubby mitts off things. You gotta constantly remake, make sequels, and do everything else. You can't just let a property be. Which is currently the biggest problem with the MCU is that they're kind of just trying to do too much too quickly. I mean, it's kind of cool that they're bringing these characters into the limelight. The problem is they're doing it so badly that no one's gonna care about these characters, or they're gonna completely miss what the original character was all about. Case in point, She-Hulk! A really bad series that completely bastardizes what She-Hulk is all about, instead choosing to make her whiny.
Oh, does this mean you're going to segue into DEI?
Well, I wasn't going to, but this is actually the perfect segue. And I'm not just saying that because Mimo secretly has me at gunpoint. I don't know how she did it, but she found a way. Yeah, DEI doesn't play as big of a role as most people might think. All of that is because most people misunderstand what it even is. It's just a scam, really. It's so companies can get their brownie points so all the white women on Twitter will tell them how good of a corporation they are. And hopefully purchase product of Mickey Mouse. But in general, DEI is not as impactful as you might think when it comes to Disney. Oh sure, they'll be vocal about it until it comes to China. And then they're oddly silent. Have you noticed that? The best example I can give of this is the live-action Mulan, which failed tremendously at appealing to a Chinese audience. Everyone hated this damn movie, including the Chinese. It also doesn't help that it was just a bad film in general, on top of completely misunderstanding a ton of Chinese culture. So you think Disney would learn that China is a highly unstable and very volatile market that's quick to backfire, right? No. Are you fucking stupid? This is multi-billion-dollar corporations. We don't learn anything.
For once, you are objectively correct.
Although I'm not gonna pretend like DEI didn't have its impact, especially trying to push a lot of female-centric superheroes like Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel, respectively. And can I just say, Brie Larson is probably the worst person you could have cast as Captain Marvel?
And how is that exactly?
Put simply, Captain Marvel is a very different character. Yeah, she's still got that girl boss, doesn't need no man energy, but at the same time, this is very different from the actual Captain Marvel. The actual Captain Marvel is a lot more cocky, sassy, and a lot more entertaining. This Captain Marvel is just kind of boring. I don't think a lot of people would actually mind Captain Marvel if she was actually a lot more fun. Because contrary to what some people might think, people actually do like girl bosses. They just need to be interesting. Over 90% of writers fail this one simple task. And it also really doesn't help that they tried to push Miss Marvel, a character most normies are not gonna know about. And on top of that, making her the main character of a Captain Marvel film, yeah, that doesn't help. Especially since this isn't all the Marvels. There's actually a lot more Marvels. Yeah, they weirdly had Carol Danvers Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, Spectrum. Yet weirdly absent is Blue Marvel and Marvel. And no, that's not my stutter, his name is Marvel.
The only one missing from this reunion is Shazam.
Oh yeah, his name was originally Captain Marvel, wasn't it? But still, I find it really funny that they exclude the Black Man from the Marvels film. And even the OG Captain Marvel. In fact, he's nowhere to be seen throughout any of the Captain Marvel films.
Slight correction.
Where?
This is Marvel.
That's not Marvel.
Oh, but it is. And this is the leader.
That's also not the lead. Oh, I see what you're doing. No need to hold me at gunpoint for this one, I'll take over. After we finish this part, of course. This is especially notable in Captain America Brave New World, with Sam Wilson being the new Captain America. The reason this is important is because it skips an entire arc that Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes went through. As before Sam Wilson became Captain America, Bucky Barnes took over the mantle as Captain America. And you know, Bucky being Bucky doesn't see himself as worthy as wielding Captain America's shield and taking up his mantle. So he gives it to the man he trusts the most, that being Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon. Which is also kind of a terrible idea to bring it in this early, as we don't know much about the Falcon. He's not really a character that even got his own solo film. Yeah, he got his own TV show, but at the same time, how many people actually watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier? And at the same time, if you have, that's not really a good enough introduction, because not everyone's going to have seen the series. That's quite a big ask. Something that would have worked a lot better is if Bucky Barnes took up the role as Captain America, realized he couldn't do it, and then gave the mantle to Sam Wilson. Because then we'd actually get some action with the Falcon and get to know him as the Falcon. But I guess because Bucky's in the Thunderbolts film, we can't have that. Okay, now we can talk about the absolute bastardization of many of the Marvel characters. Let's talk about the one I'm sure many people are wanting me to talk about, that being the Hulk. Disney will not allow the Hulk to be the Hulk. The same reason they won't allow the Punisher to be the Punisher. Because we can't have interesting stories with morally gray characters, because that would actually require hiring a good writer. And you can't make the funny haha jokes! The Hulk got completely neutered in the MCU. Like, he's just not allowed to be the Hulk. Yet they have Red Hulk and Leader, two of the most notable villains for Hulk, in a Captain America movie, on top of completely underutilizing Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. Disney does not want to do a Hulk film because Disney does not want to do a film about a man that's gone through an insane amount of emotional trauma and going on an emotional rampage. And Disney also doesn't want to make a film about a very morally gray hero that, yes, kills the bad guys, but at what point does that become too far? Because both Hulk and Punisher are very morally gray characters by their inherent design. Hulk's entire thing is caused by emotional trauma and abuse. The Hulk is basically a trauma response. Hulk is a completely different character from Bruce Banner, and can range from heroic to downright monstrous. It really depends on the writer, really, and which story you're talking about. The Hulk is a borderline force of nature, capable of wiping out entire city blocks on his own by accident. The Hulk is simultaneously an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Frank Castle is a man with a moral code to kill the bad guys. Yes, he protects the innocent. Yes, he kills the bad guys only. But at what point does this become too far? At what point does Frank Castle step over the line? That is the appeal of Punisher. He's a man that takes matters into his own hands. Now, whether he's right or not, that's entirely debatable. That's the point. He's meant to be a gray area. But because so many people use his symbol, that means bad. Punisher bad. We cannot make the silly jokes. Disney does not want these kind of characters to stand out because they do not fit with the brand. It's a wonder something like Deadpool is even allowed to exist. And yet, somehow, some way, Deadpool is still one of the most popular films from the MCU. Almost like it understands the character. I know, crazy thought. The amount of times the MCU has bastardized a character because they want to push a certain branding is insane. A current example I can give is Leader. Now, the Leader is a very important character to the Hulk. He's basically the antithesis to the Hulk. Where Hulk is mostly brawn and no brains, Leader is no brawn and all brains. He's the Hulk's opposite in every way, making him the perfect counterpart. And for some reason, he's in a Captain America film, and he doesn't even look like the Leader. And rightfully, no one calls him the Leader, because he's not Leader. He's a cheap knockoff villain. I would say he's great value, Leader, but that's an insult to great value. And there's just a ton of villains just like this, especially MODOK. Seriously, what were they thinking with MODOK? He's not meant to be appealing, he's meant to be disgusting and ugly. And yet somehow they made it worse.
And bald.
Oh yeah, they made him bald too! Man just can't catch a break. Especially since a lot of times it's meant to just push diversity. Like, I'm fine with Kang being played by a black man. In fact, Kang oftentimes had a black voice actor because they need someone with a deep voice. It works really well for him and makes sense. The problem, he doesn't look like Kang half the time. They have to draw attention to the fact that he's played by a black man. Remember when everyone complained about Nick Fury being played by Samuel L. Jackson? What? No, that didn't happen? Wait, what do you mean it was different but people liked it because it was still good? This is current year and we have to make everything about politics.
Simply it wasn't a hot button issue.
God, I hate this culture war nonsense. Especially with something like the High Evolutionary. You look at High Evolutionary's comic design versus his movie design, it's like night and day. Everything has to be sanitized. Nothing can be cool or interesting. We can't have something be comic accurate, now can we? But before we get into the final and major stuff, I first need to address the endgame problem. That being a lot of people believe the MCU should have ended at endgame and stayed dead. I disagree to some extent. Now that said, I get why people wanted it to end there. It's a theoretical perfect end. It's a bookend, really. Everyone gets their final moments, the actors' contracts are done and up, and that's about it. However, I think it could have been done a lot better. The simple thing is time. If given a bit more time, I'm sure they could have introduced many other characters. In fact, I think the biggest misstep is probably not introducing the Fantastic Four any sooner. Yeah, we're this late into the MCU and only now are we getting the Fantastic Four. Post-Endgame would have been the perfect time to introduce them, and then bring back the X-Men. And then bring back many of the other more obscure series. Suddenly this wouldn't be a problem. And hell, this would have been the perfect time to reboot the MCU, as it were. Bring in the street-level characters like the Wrecking Crew, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and many others. You suddenly don't have multiversal threats and you suddenly can have these small-scale stories. The problem is they're kinda doing it a little too late. This would have been the perfect time to introduce things like Doctor Doom, Daredevil, the Fantastic Four, and many others. If you really want to get specific, you can introduce other characters like Blade, for instance, and suddenly form the Marvel Knights. But that would mean Disney actually had a plan. You can also introduce the Thunderbolts all of a sudden. And suddenly, that makes a lot more sense to introduce the Thunderbolts. The Avengers have basically disbanded at this point, and now there's suddenly a huge power vacuum. A power vacuum that a certain clever villain named Baron Zemo could take advantage of?
He's not in the Thunderbolts movie.
Damn it, Disney, why do you have to keep making missed opportunities? Anyways, on to the final part. But let's get the bigger issues out of the way now that we got all that settled out. Overuse of CGI. This is way too common. A little CGI is fine, but the problem is they just use it as a crutch. There is no practical effects anymore. Even something like Spider-Man's suit is not even real, it's CGI. Everything is CGI, and it makes everything look fake. Now let's just get it out of the way, the multiverse stuff. Everyone needs to have a multiverse nowadays, it seems like. Everything needs to be connected in some way or another. And this completely defeats the point of the Avengers. The Avengers was about a bunch of completely unrelated movies coming together for one big team-up. And outside of the Avengers, that's where that should have ended. But then you have things that are kind of connected to one another, and if you don't watch one, you're not gonna understand the other. Like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which predominantly features the plot of WandaVision being a very central plot point. If you've never seen WandaVision, this whole thing just falls apart and looks confusing. Especially since it's a Disney Plus show, something not everyone has.
Gotta sell those Disney Plus subscriptions somehow.
Yeah, this ain't it, Chief. It just ends up creating movies that are just convoluted and make no sense on their own. Especially when you try to shove a bunch of other stuff in there that doesn't belong. It worked for the Avengers because inherently the Avengers is a crossover film, but not everything is a crossover film. This especially carries over to something like Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I know I'm gonna anger a lot of people, but I just don't like Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like with Captain Marvel, I think it was very much miscast. And it's really funny to me how they have to use previous Spider-Man from the other Spider-Man films just to sell No Way Home. I mean, I gave the first two films a shot. I did not like them very much. And to this day, I have not seen No Way Home. Just out of the sheer fact that I just did not like these films. Spider-Man this series feels way too reliant on Tony Stark and completely misses the point of Spider-Man. But you might say, but the Fantastic Four were in the early days of Spider-Man. They're integral to Spider-Man. This is the same thing, really. Yeah, not really. I mean, kind of, but not really. The Fantastic Four is not really an integral part of Spider-Man lore. Yeah, they've got connections, and Spider-Man and the Human Torch are canonically bros, but that's about it. The problem is this Spider-Man feels like it can't stand on its own two legs and has to be propped up by Iron Man and the other parts of the MCU. Something Spider-Man previously never had a problem with. By trying to force everything into this nice little box, they end up breaking the box. And then they try to shove more things into the box. And then sometimes they try to shove a giant god into the box. Hey, that segues me to the Eternals!
Literally who?
Exactly. The Eternals are kind of a big deal in the Marvel Universe, but they're not very well known. Neither are something like the Celestials. Now, on paper, this sounds like a great idea. Introduce a whole new concept with a whole bunch of new big bads? This sounds like a great multi-film series, or even like a television series. Wait, what do you mean it's literally just one movie? What do you mean Arisham's corpse is a giant plot point in Captain America: Brave New World? What do you mean we haven't heard anything from the Eternals past this point? Yeah, they kinda just dropped the ball. Especially since there's a lot of Eternals, and there's not really a lot of time to flesh them out. So you think the goal would be to make a couple films about a couple of Eternals, and then have them all get together for one big fight. Yeah, it'd be the same origin story schlop, but you know, you kinda need that for this sort of thing. Especially since many of the Eternals are named after historical mythology figures like Gilgamesh, Icarus, Athena, and so on. You'd think you'd want more time to establish this sort of thing, right? Well, no, they don't. And then you have something like Shang-Chi. And yes, that's actually how his name is pronounced. I thought it was Shang-Chi myself for a long time. And he's kind of his own entire thing with his own entire lore. And you think this is also where we get the proper interpretation of the Mandarin, right? The 10 rings and all that? You know, the cool Mandarin?
Don't be silly, we wouldn't want to offend our Chinese overlords. And besides, the Mandarin is a stereotype.
It doesn't matter, he's cool. And the MCU is literally one of the few places that just refuses to adapt the Mandarin. Even something like Iron Man Armored Adventures adapted the Mandarin. And while I haven't seen that show in a long time, I remember the Mandarin being a lot cooler. And if you're gonna appeal to the Chinese market, at least go full on. Bring all the Chinese characters out. I'll bring all the Asian characters out if you want. Bring Swordmaster, bring Arrow, bring Luna Snow, bring all of them. Let them have the spotlight and make good movies. No one's gonna care that they're Chinese as long as their movies are good.
But that would mean making good films.
Alright, I forgot it's current year and quality is dead. But you wanna know what the biggest problem with the MCU is? The problem is Disney just doesn't know when to stop. They just keep pushing forward and don't know when to stop. Oh sure, maybe there's a chance they make a decent movie. Well, let you in on a little bit of a secret. If the film uses shock marketing, uses race as a marketing tactic, the film is going to be bad 9 out of 10 times. Because they do not believe that the film can stand on its own 2 legs, so they gotta use controversy to sell it. Controversy sells, and rage bait is a good way to get attention going. But honestly, that's all for now, and honestly, I'm done talking about the MCU. And frankly, I expect my points to hold up for quite a while, because I doubt Disney's gonna learn. They're just gonna keep trying the exact same thing and it's not gonna work. If you like this video, well, I'm glad. If you dislike this video, well, alright, fair enough. You're entitled to your own opinion. But for those who did enjoy it, I hope to see you all next time, and goodbye.